Hello everyone, the Instant Camera Guy here, and welcome to another video on I-type battery adapters. Now, before I get to the battery adapter in question, a little bit of backstory for those that have no idea. A while back I posted a really long video titled The Ultimate Guide to I-type Adapters. Now in that video I featured several different adapters from the reservoir adapter, I featured battery adapters made by Retrospect, I featured battery adapters such as the Polar Studio adapter, the power bar, and at the end of the video I featured my own I-type battery solution, the Polar. And effectively, the reason that I put my Polar solution at the very end of the video is, unlike basically all the other adapters that were in that video, the Polar is not a plug-and-play solution. It is a solution that is designed to be integrated into the camera whilst you're refurbishing it. Because to install one, it involves basically wiring the battery adapter into the camera's pre-existing circuitry. And the advantage to that is with the Polar, which comprises of two AAA-sized 3.7 volt lithium-ion batteries and a buck converter, the advantage to the way that it's wired and what makes the Polar so unique is that it seamlessly integrates into how the camera functions. Basically, at the rear of the camera, sitting right about here, where the rear panel hinges like so, there is a switch. When you erect the camera and you pull that upwards, the switch is toggled up, and when you collapse the camera, the switch is pushed down, and basically what it does is, in the erect position, electricity is allowed to flow through the ribbon cables at the base of the camera, and when you collapse the camera, that power is cut, effectively turning it off. Now, just as a digression, that is one of the reasons, by the way, that you should never leave an SX-70 erect on display if you have film in the camera, because effectively, when an SX-70 is erect like so, it is powered on. So if you have film in that camera, the batteries are sending voltage through the camera. Anyway, the way that I wire it, I remove the connections to that hinge switch and then recycle the switch. So basically bridge the connection that used to go through the switch, and then I recycle that switch to cut the negative battery lead before it goes to the buck converter. And that basically means that all power from the batteries going to the buck converter and to the camera gets completely cut. And basically that means a seamless integration in terms of how the battery adapter works. There's no on-off switch that's needed, there's no power indicator light that's needed, because basically if the camera is open, it works, right? And if the camera is collapsed, it's completely powered off. There's no batteries that are going to drain. It's a really elegant solution in terms of its simplicity. And that's why I sort of included it as something different, because the way that it's wired in is drastically different to basically how all other battery adapters on the market work. Most battery adapters that are currently for sale are what are known as pogo pin style adapters. So like my modified reservoir adapter here, which is sort of a hybrid between Polar and the original adapter, because these reservoir adapters, the original electronics inside them are very unreliable and they tend to break. But it shows off those little pogo pins that I'm talking about. And basically what these pogo pins are designed to do is insert through the base of the camera. So you would punch two holes in the leather, pogo pins would go through the base of the camera, and at the base of any SX-70 sits a bunch of test holes, right? So in the bottom panel, there are two little pre-existing holes. And what those holes did is, back in the day when a technician would calibrate or repair a camera, rather than having to use packs of film all the time, they would put the camera on a special device that would send 6 volts into it so that they could test all functionality. And those machines could also have variable voltage, so they could test the camera all the way down to 4.8 volts and all the way up to like 6.4 volts to make sure that behavior was identical throughout the range. Now, a lot of battery adapters on the market take advantage of those pre-existing battery terminal holes. And it's a pretty clever idea, right? It certainly represents one of the easiest ways to tap into the SX-70's power. Now, when you do that, though, it does come with a few drawbacks. For example, you need an on-off switch. You probably want to have some kind of LED indicator light to let you know whether it's powered on or powered off. And of course, you either need to completely replace the bottom panel, like Polar Studio's adapter, or you need to remove the leather, or at the very least punch holes in the leather so that you can install an adapter to the top. To the bottom. Right, so the reservoir adapter installs like so, right? And then you would tighten the little tripod screw which holds it in place. That is another drawback to these. They need to use an alpha or a sonar camera most of the time in order to be secured to the base of the camera, unless you're gonna, I don't know, use double-sided tape or something. Or in the case of Retrospect's adapter, or even Polar Studio's adapter, either the original screws are recycled or the entire bottom panel is replaced. So to tap into that bottom power, it's actually quite involved. Like, the parts list that you need is a lot higher than doing it the Polarvolt method. So where I'm going with this is, in that ultimate guide to I-type adapters, I featured a battery adapter known as the Evo. And I still have the Evo, it's right here. Now, much to my surprise, the Evo gathered way more attention than I thought that it would. Now, one of the most commonly questions I get asked is, well, where can I purchase the Evo from? And, well, at the time I released the video, I thought this was going to be something that would be available to the global market, and it turns out that I was wrong, and I'll go into the reasons for that in just a minute. But basically, shortly after I did that video, the Evo was pulled from sale in international audiences. And for those that didn't watch the big long video, the Evo is the brainchild of Yongmin Liu from the
SX-70R
project. This is his battery adapter. It basically consists of a big thick PCB, so this is a fiberglass circuit board basically, with a little acrylic block, a whole bunch of circuitry in here that converts battery voltage, and it consists of a 550 milliamp hour soft cell lithium ion battery. It's got a little on-off switch, it's got some power LED indicators, and it's USB-C rechargeable. There were a few problems with this though. My biggest complaint with it, I'm sure you guys can already guess, is the battery that is in here is baked in. It is actually hard soldered to the circuit board itself, and although you can take the little acrylic block off with 4 screws, if you ever wanted to replace this battery, you're going to have to bust out the soldering iron. So I didn't like that about this adapter, but you know who else didn't like that? The Postal Service. Because it turns out when you are sending stuff internationally, many countries straight up do not like lithium-ion batteries being sent through the post. And how stringent the post office is about batteries is honestly going to depend on the country, and it depends on the carrier. Some couriers seem to have absolutely no issue. Others will just straight up send your product back if it's got a built-in battery. Or they'll force you to send it via boat, which is ridiculous. And so basically what Yongmin discovered is trying to sell these internationally was a nightmare. Within China, it was pretty easy because the Postal Service would happily accept them, but outside of China, these were a nightmare to sell. So, wanting to help Yongmin solve a solution, having invented a battery solution of my own, and being on the warpath for making sure that all I-type batteries featured user-replaceable batteries, I decided to hit the drawing board and see if, between the two of us, we couldn't do one better. And that is why I would like to show you guys this. I guess you could call it the Evo 2.0. This is a prototype. It's not what the finished product is going to look like. But basically, this design takes the Evo and my Polarvolt solution and basically fuses them together in some kind of unholy matrimony, giving you like a combination of both. So this particular version has a 9-volt lithium-ion rechargeable battery The reason that I chose this battery is not only they're cheap, but they have their own built-in USB-C charging circuitry. It uses the exact same buck converter chip that my Polaroid does, only instead of wiring into the hinge of the camera, it now has a dedicated on-off switch and a resistor and an LED light to indicate that power is on. Without this, it is of course possible to leave it accidentally switched on. I mean, you can still do that if you ignore the LED, but if you leave this switched on, over time it will drain the battery because a buck converter will draw current at idle just in the voltage conversion process. So basically, with the exception of my Polaroid, pretty much all other battery adapters on the market that have some kind of circuitry for converting voltage will eventually drain themselves flat. It might take a month or so, but they will eventually go flat. So the way that it works is identical to the regular Evo. Here I have an alpha spec camera. This is my open SX-70, my wood grain one. And yeah, it works basically in much the same way. You turn it on using the switch, you can erect it, and yeah, it works pretty much as expected. It is also possible, although I haven't finalized one, but I have just mocked one up here, it is possible to also use a 2 AAA battery holder and use the same 10440 lithium-ion cells that my Polaroid solution uses. Pretty neat, huh? Now, doing that does result in a more powerful I-type adapter. So these 9-volt batteries, as novel as they are with their built-in charging circuitry, are definitely good enough to power, say, a Model 1 or an Alpha, probably even a Sonar, but they really struggle with an SLR 680. The 10440 cells are much more powerful, they have a better current output, and as a result would be better for a 680. But either battery adapter is able to be used. The only difference being if you use 10440 cells, you will need an external battery charger. Which I will just show you guys mine. I just use one of these things. They're very cheap. You can pick them up on eBay, Amazon, that kind of stuff. My model is the BH042100-04U. So yeah, that's really the only difference. Theoretically, I could make these Evo 2.0 battery adapters using either type of battery. I also got Yongmin. This is basically a prototype at the moment, like I said. The actual position for the chips and things on the circuit board is not 100% lining up. So I actually, to fit the buck converter, I ended up having to actually raise the buck converter onto little legs and then kind of like smoosh it down. So it's kind of like lying sideways on the PCB, extended by little legs, because it just didn't fit. Like the footprint works, but Yongmin forgot about the fact that a buck converter is 3-dimensional and it would get jammed underneath the body panel of the SX-70. So yeah, the finished result will have some slight tweaks to the PCB and to all the position of the chips and stuff on the board. And I'm also getting Yongmin to change the switch that the new adapter is going to use, because I want to use the same kind of switch that is already built into these AAA battery holders. I mean, why bother having to go source, a third-party switch when you can just recycle the one that comes with your battery adapter? It just doesn't make sense to me. So that is one thing that Yongmin is going to do. But yeah, that pretty much brings me to the point of this video, which is this something that you would like to see as a product? Do you think there is a demand for this? I think the advantage to it is it's obviously quite a cheap battery solution. And I mean that in terms of this is frugal to produce, being that that the adapter itself is simply just a giant thick PCB held in place with a tripod screw. All the parts and components are pretty cheap to produce. So I wouldn't see this being a very expensive battery adapter for someone that wanted, you know, I-type solution that didn't really care about how it looked. It is obviously a bit of an ugly battery adapter solution, although for some reason I tend to find that an I-type adapter can be ugly provided that it's removable. There is definitely a subset of followers of this channel and just clients in general that see the SX-70 as such an objet d'art that anything remotely straying from the original design brief is seen in their eyes as utter sacrilege. And I know there's definitely demand for some kind of an I-type adapter that you can remove. Although I would certainly place a rebuttal here and say that, well, when you're actually using the camera, it is very ugly. And, you know, at the very least, you have to punch holes in your leather. So I don't know, are you so precious about the form factor of the SX-70, but somehow willing to live with holes in the leather and an adapter that you have to remove? I don't know. I can't explain it, but, you know, the customer is always right. So yeah, is this something that you would like to see produced? Is it something that I should sell? Is it something that I should offer in a kit for people to DIY? I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that, you know, anyone would actually want to use something like this? As I said before, it's basically everything that my Polavolt does, just with a manual on-off switch. Now, the whole point of my Polavolt when I designed it was that it would be as integrated into the camera circuitry as was humanly possible. But I guess if that's not a priority for you, you know, something external might be just what you're looking for. Yeah, let me know what you think. One other thing that we'll have to solve is obviously some of these through-hole components on the base of the PCB do have the potential to short circuit. Now, in the case of these 9-volt batteries, they do have their own built-in short circuit protection. So if you short the battery out, it just simply stops outputting voltage until you plug it in to recharge it. And I manually did bridge these terminals to see what would happen to the buck converter and to the battery. And all it seems to do is just dump voltage, and it doesn't affect the circuitry too much. It didn't blow anything up. But certainly I thought maybe putting some small little adhesive rubber feet at the bottom so that it could never bridge on anything would be one solution to that. But yeah, just let me know what you think. In the future, speaking of the Polavolt, I am going to be doing a massive, deeper dive on the subject. Currently, the only videos I've got about it are videos on how to wire one up. So if you want to DIY, there's probably more than enough information. I have since rejigged the way that I wire these to the ribbon cables to make it a bit neater and easier with less cutting. I figured out some different attachment points. So at some stage, I do want to redo the video of how I wire them in. But I do get a lot of frequently asked questions about the Polavolt battery solution, so I do want to expand and make a feature-length video going through all the different bits and pieces that you would ever want to know. But yeah, let me know what do you think of the Evo 2.0? Is this something that you'd like to see me produce? Do you hate it? Do you think it's uglier than the standard Polavolt? Let me know your thoughts. And I wanted to close the video just by talking a little bit about on the subject of battery adapters being ugly. I'm going to cover this in more detail when I do my full-length Polavolt video, which answers all the frequently asked questions. So before I make that, by the way, if you have any questions to ask, please feel free. But certainly one of the most frequent comments I get, whether it's reservoir adapter, retrospect, whatever, is from people saying, oh, I-type battery adapters are ugly. They don't want to mess with the sleek lines of the camera or the original design or something like that. To which I would just say, I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? I-type battery solutions open up a world of much cheaper film, much more readily available film, and in my opinion, just better overall performance in terms of comparing, say, SX-70 film to I-type film. You get that faster ISO. For me, it is certainly worth it. And running your camera off of lithium-ion batteries in particular does produce a level of performance otherwise that is not obtainable with built-in batteries. They just simply run better. And whether or not you think a I-type battery adapter is ugly or not is, I guess, entirely subjective and completely up to you. Because here's the thing as a consumer, if you don't want your camera modified, or you don't want to add some extra bulk to it, you don't have to. Just leave it unrefurbished and just shoot 600 film, and you'll pay the extra $30 per 5-pack for the privilege. But if you don't want to mess with the cosmetics, don't. It's just that the one thing that you should know is there's no way to add an I-type adapter without changing the appearance somehow. I mean, those batteries have to fit somewhere. And on the subject of the Polar Volt, because one of the most frequent things that come up is people say, oh, you know, can you get it in chrome or white or another color or something like that? The whole purpose of the Polar Volt is to be made purely entirely off-the-shelf components, right? This is a battery adapter you can get from an electronics store. I have managed to source them in clear as well, but they simply just do not come in other colors. They don't come in metal because, well, a metal battery holder would be ridiculous, and I'll let you figure out why that would be the case. But they don't tend to come in any other colors other than black and clear if you're lucky and you find a good supplier. By the way, these clear ones are for Christmas tree light LEDs. That's what they get used for. But I wanted to bring something up on that subject of the black battery adapter. And that is that Polaroid, as they released different accessories for the SX-70, as they released sonar battery housings, for example, such as found on the SX-70 sonar, they made them out of black ABS plastic. That's just what they did. Despite adding an entire extra circuit, idler gears, connections to the sonar housing, they didn't make these chrome, or in this case gold, or even out of the same black plastic that they made the body panels of. They were a separate type of plastic. Additionally, when they made their accessories, they didn't make these things chrome. They made them out of black ABS plastic. Mint, when they made a flash bar, made them out of black ABS plastic. Do I need to go on? Here, I'll keep on going, right? The Polaroid tripod mount. I'll give you 10 guesses as to what material it's made out of. Yep, you guessed it. Black ABS plastic. What about the shutter release? Is that chrome? Is that gold? Is that ivory? No, it is black ABS plastic. Every single accessory produced for the SX-70 was made using black ABS plastic and basically looked like an add-on accessory. So the next time that you accuse me of coming up with some kind of battery solution that looks out of place and doesn't follow the original design guide as set out by Polaroid, I would actually argue that my solution is more in line with how Polaroid did their accessories than any other battery adapter in the market. Because honestly, this is something that Polaroid would have come up with. Polaroid, when they introduced the SX-70, hated spending any more money on the thing, and anything that they could recycle, they did. If they could make only minimal changes to the tooling, they did. And this is exactly the kind of thing that they would have come up with had Polaroid done this. They would have had some add-on accessory for sure, because that's exactly what they did with the sonar. I get so many clients contacting me, asking me, can the sonar housing be removed? Like, can you take a sonar camera, remove the autofocus, because they don't realize that it's all built in and, you know, basically part of the shutter assembly, because it looks like a detachable piece. And that's because that's how Polaroid designed it. So yeah, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. if you want a battery adapter that is arguably the most in line with Polaroid's original design philosophy, then my Polar Volt is probably it. Anyway, I will be going over that fact again in my Polar Volt video when I do the full-length one, but that was just something that I thought was interesting, because the more that I thought about it, the more I realized that, yeah, those nitpicking about things being ugly maybe aren't being faithful to the original Polaroid design brief. Anyway, that about does it for this video. I am putting out less content at the moment in terms of repairs just because I am simply far too busy. I'm still renovating my workshop and my house, and my turnaround time at the moment has really stretched out. Normally when I get a client's camera, I have it finished within a week or two, generally within the week, quite often within 1 or 2 weeks, but at the moment it's ballooned out because I just simply am stretched very thin. I am still in business. I am still repairing cameras. If you want your camera serviced, please feel free to get in touch. Just be aware that until I get my workshop fully operational, which I am hoping to do come the end of October, my turnaround time will be longer. But once that workshop is all completely set up and I can work in there full time tinkering away, my productivity will get a lot faster. I'll be a lot more productive and far easier to build things. So please stay patient, and I will see you in the next video.